Hello, my name is James Taylor.
And it's me, Maria Franzoni.
And you're listening to the SpeakersU Podcast. Good to see you, Maria. How are things going this week?
Yeah, not bad. Had to put the heating on. I think we mentioned this the other time, didn't we? The heating's on. So, yeah, not bad. And I've had to, you'll notice I've had my hair tied up a couple of times of late. I've had to because I keep getting caught in the rain with my puppy, going out with my dog. And it's a mess. If I take my hair out, it's like, it's a big bush. Really wild.
A bit Chaka Khan vibes we're getting.
Yeah, it's sadly not as good as Chaka Khan's. It's sort of more crystal tips. But anyway.
Well, last week I was in Singapore. I'd done 2 events in Singapore this month at different points. So I literally going in for 24 hours doing it in Singapore. And I must say, it did feel quite nice to get a bit of warmth into your bones, just for even for 24 hours, even though it was raining, but it was kind of warm rain, so you don't mind it as much. But while I was there, I met up with Andrew Vine, which I don't know if you've ever worked with Andrew from the Insight Bureau.
I love Andrew. And it's such a good name, Insight Bureau, because he's very insightful himself. So yeah, a lot of time for Andrew, yes.
And Andrew is a real specialist in geopolitical and politicians. He used to be at The Economist, so he really understands that world as well. We're doing an event together. He's booked me for an event in November in New Zealand that he's been involved in as well. So I thought this week we could maybe talk about speaker bureaus, because I'm sure that it must be one of the most common questions that you get from speakers. How do I get represented by a speaker bureau?
Yeah, it's actually, I think the question is, how do I get somebody else to do all my bookings and sell me? And they think that the speaker bureau would do it. So yes.
It's a different question then, isn't it? Because maybe we should do a separate one about that one, because that's not quite the same thing. You know, a lot of speakers think that the bureau is representing them, when that's not really true.
Yeah, they're hoping the bureau is the answer, but sometimes it's not. As you all know, because you work with quite a few bureaus. How many bureaus are you listed with at the moment?
I think I'm 40, in fact, maybe 41. There was a new one that just came in today that just inquired about me if they could put me on the website, which is very nice. And I mean, I think because you've come from this world, the world of agents and bureaus, I came from the world of agents, but in a different industry, in the music industry, and I've also been a manager of music artists, which is a very different role, where you are genuinely, your client is the speaker, or is the talent, is the performer. But with the agents, and music works slightly different to the corporate world, but in the corporate world, it's the first thing I had to get my head around is that, all these bureau agents, as brilliant as they are, their client is not me. I am not the client. I am the supplier. And speakers would hate to probably hear this, but refer to it this way, but we are the supplier. We are supplying some talent. We are supplying something. Their main focus is on how can they make their clients happy.
Yeah, so I mean, the client for the bureau is whoever's organising the conference or event, and the speaker is actually, is as you say, a supplier. So the bureau is a client of the speaker, and speakers should treat bureaus as clients in the same way as they treat clients, and develop those strong relationships with them in the same way as they do clients. So yes, it's a really important one, and I think most people don't realise that, and they think that once they're listed with the bureau is then going to do everything possible to book them. Not necessarily, not at all.
Yeah. So you were at London Speaker Bureau, and which has been the biggest. I think it is the global speaker bureaus. How many speakers did you have on your roster?
So I was originally, my first bureau was CSA Celebrity Speakers, then London Speaker Bureau, and then I had my own bureau. And the London Speaker Bureau at the time when I was working with them had 4,500 speakers, which is a small number for a bureau of that size, actually. And although it sounds big, I think they're nearer 6,000 now. But there are bureaus out there boasting, 12 to 15,000 speakers on their rosters, which is just crazy. So it can vary from hundreds to tens of thousands of speakers on rosters. It can be huge. So yeah, we had 4,438 to be precise.
Okay, so if someone's watching this just now, they're not with any bureaus at the moment, how do they become 4,449? Or when do they know that they should be that speaker to be added to this particular bureau?
So, bureaus are interested in speakers who are already successful. They've already got momentum. They're already in demand. Those are the ones that are the most interesting to them. Unless there's always always an exception to the rule. Unless you've just done something quite major, and therefore you are newsworthy and interesting at the moment. So, for example, when Tim Peake, the astronaut, came down from the space station, he was very interesting. Everybody wanted to book him to speak because he had just come back. When a head of state retires or changes role and starts speaking, everybody's interested in them. So you may be surprised to hear that Theresa May got snapped up when she stepped down as Prime Minister by a US bureau. I don't know if anybody booked her in the UK, but in the US they snapped her up straight away, as they have with many of our former Prime Ministers and former heads of state around the world. It's quite interesting. So. But generally, the sort of the usual speakers who are not former heads of states or former CEOs or astronauts, who are business speakers or motivational speakers, you have to have already some momentum. You need to be already making some money. That you need to prove that there's a demand for you.
Yeah. What is the fee level for a speaker? That a speaker's earning a consistent fee level that is then interesting to the bureau. They go, actually, okay, we can make enough commission here to warrant them being on our roster.
Yeah, so it depends what the overheads are for a bureau, of course. I mean, if it's a one-man band, a small bureau, because there's no, just like speakers, there's no regulation and there's no barrier to entry. You can become a speaker as long as you've got a voice, right? With bureaus, as long as you've got a computer and a telephone, you can become a speaker bureau. So you've got all different sizes. You've got really enormous bureaus with very expensive offices and huge overheads, who are going to want to have speakers of a higher fee level. And you've got others who are individuals who are going to be flexible. But generally, unless it's for schools, speakers for schools tend to start in the hundreds. But if it's in the business world, you are looking at a 4-figure fee as a bare minimum.
Yeah. And then one of the things that I find interesting, just kind of starting to learn about the speaker bureau world, is how they are very different. Some of these bureaus. There's some that, like we were talking about Andrew Vine from the Insight Bureau. He really specialized in that geopolitical, so that economic world, economists, former leaders. That's his sweet spot. Where there's other ones I know who are very celebrity focused, and then there's obviously even there's other ones you mentioned, education. There's ones that just focus on finding speakers for schools or for universities or colleges as well. So I guess it's also like you have to kind of figure out which bureau you might be represented on a bureau's website, but which ones are actually is it going to be right for me to actually spend the real time trying to really develop that bureau relationship?
Absolutely. So you can usually tell by the speakers that they're promoting what type of bureau they are and the kind of people they're interested in. And you can also see by the testimonials and the clients that they work with, again, what type of bureau they are. And I think the mistake that many speakers make is that they think, well, I can, when they're trying to get listed with a bureau, is that they'll take the same approach with every single bureau, which you can't. You've got to tailor it to those individual bureaus. I'd love to know, James, on an aside, which was the very first bureau that listed you and how did you get into that first bureau?
Oh, good point. Who was the first bureau that listed me? I'd probably have to go back and check. I would imagine probably it was a bureau in the Middle East or Asia. It wouldn't have been an American bureau. I know that because when I got started initially speaking, at that point, I didn't have what's called an O1 visa. We should probably come back and talk about visas to different countries at that point. And so I didn't really have the ability to work in the States, legally. I couldn't do that. So I tend not to focus on America. And also for me as a non-American speaker, it felt really scary to go into the American market because there's so many great speakers there. And I thought I need to build my reps, my time. I need to earn my dues, pay your dues, sorry. And so I did that in the Middle East. So probably those first bureaus I worked with were in the Middle East or in Asia, for me anyway. And then gradually I just extended on those as well. But I'm amazed because even, I'm probably about 40, 45 bureaus now. But I would say really, if I really came down to it, there's only 5 that consistently send business my way. And then there'll be maybe another 5 or 10 who you might get one thing a year from, for example, but so it's still worth kind of maintaining that relationship. And then there's probably half of them that I don't think I've had a single booking from. And I think, is it me? Have I done something wrong? But then you kind of figure out that I think a lot of agents, they have their list, people that they work with time and time again, and they feel very comfortable. And it's kind of hard to kind of nudge the people out. You really have to figure out how you're going to insert yourself into that top 3 names that get recommended on a particular topic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, you know, of the 4,500 that we had, probably 20% got booked once in each year. And then, and you know, because I wrote about it in my book, 1% were the ones that were booked again and again and again globally. And so you do tend to have those names that you trust and want to put forward. So there are people who will be sitting on a roster who might get booked once every now and then by the Bureau, might not get booked at all. And it varies because, you know, there are some speakers, like you were saying on a previous episode, that, you know, you've spoken 100 times this year. And, you know, we're talking about another speaker who speaks, you know, 240 times a year. And then there'll be speakers who only speak 4 times a year. And so you have a mixture of those speakers on the roster because you need to give a choice for all the topics. So you need to have a choice for each price point, each location. Sometimes there's a language issue as well. So there's all of these things that you need to take into account.
Yeah, and we're saying this word bureau as if it's one amorphous blob for a bureau, but within that, I know like there's a couple of bureaus I work with, and I just work with like 2 or 3 agents within that bureau, but they have like lots of different agents or consultants within them. But I've spent time, I've built a relationship. For whatever reason, they like me, these particular agents. I don't know what I've done right for some of them, but and they're just constantly putting me in and proposing me to their clients. And then other people in that bureau, you know, that I'd never get anything from, and maybe I don't appeal to them, or maybe they're dealing with certain industries that don't work so much for what I'm doing as well. Well, one of the questions I know that I kind of had to kind of try and figure out early on was commissions. Traditionally, what commissions does a bureau take? If that speaker gets, say, $10,000 as a fee, what would be the usual commissions that bureau would take, and would they add that on top of the $10,000, or they would take that off of the $10,000?
So it varies. It really varies because it depends very much on their overhead. So you can't really dictate to a bureau. But the standard commission, I mean, the standard recognised commission is 20 to 25%. There are some bureaus who will charge 15% to undercut other bureaus. And then there are some that will charge more if they've got a lower fee. Because if you're charging £1,000, you probably need to charge a higher commission. When the fees get really high, your commission percentage comes low. You know, if you're talking about $500,000 speaker or $1 million speaker, they do exist. The fees come down in terms of percentages. So, do you quote net? Do you quote gross? Do you add on top? How do you do it? This is a difficult one because the market where they get it right, I think, is the US. The US is ahead of everywhere else, and the US speakers and the US bureaus work in gross. They work in a gross fee. So if you go directly to a speaker, the speaker will quote $20,000. If you go to the bureau will quote $20,000. If the speaker gets booked through the bureau, then take their commission, and then they pay the speaker less the commission. I like that model, and it's what I tried to replicate when I had my bureau, so that you were not actually negotiating on fee. You weren't trying to compete on fee, which is really awful to do, because there are some clients that will go around to different bureaus and they will book through the bureau that has a lower rate on the website, and everybody loses.
Yeah, I would say this is especially the case in not just in the US, but I had one recently where we had 4 different organizations looking to book me or inquire about fees for the same event, exact same end client. So in this case, what happened, there was 2 I think it was 2 people from the company itself at different levels within the company. 2 of them reached out to me directly. Then someone else, I think it was the events company, reached out to 2 other bureaus as well to get my fees. So you've got all these things coming in. I said, this is the same event, and I just told I told everyone about each other because I felt this is just mad that you're all doing this. And I can understand what obviously maybe the client actually in this case it wasn't that they were looking to undercut. That wasn't actually the main reason. It was just such a big company. They were just no one was talking with each other, and so that was the issue there. So I understand, like, for the gross, that makes a lot of sense to do the gross because then everyone is in the same place.
Yeah, the problem is outside of the US, many organisations many bureaus will work with a net, and then they'll add their commission on top, and then you are competing. And I've actually, I've fallen out with a client on that, where they're saying, well, when I went direct to the speaker, they charged less, which that's not right. That shouldn't happen. It should never happen. So you always want to be in a situation where you're not falling out on fee, where a client doesn't feel they're paying more. They shouldn't do. So what bureaus tend to do, if a speaker says this is my fee, they will go to them and say, well, the client has got this amount, in order to be able to book that speaker at the same fee that they know that the speaker is quoting themselves out directly. So they'll find a way, or they won't give you the gig, because otherwise they're going to lose clients. That fee integrity piece is so important. I think something else that happens with clients and why they end up going to lots of bureaus and lots of different people, they want an answer now. And if they go to such and such a bureau, and that person hasn't come back to them quickly with your fee, and they find a way of getting you to you directly and get an answer faster, they will do that because they want the answer now. And there's just no patience. And I used to, I got a bit of a reputation for this when I had my bureau, is if a client came to me, one of the first questions I would ask is, have you put this to any other bureau already? Yes, we have. We put it to this bureau and that bureau. I said, have you given them a chance to answer? No, they haven't answered yet. Please give them the chance to answer, because I am not going to compete with somebody on speed. I'm going to compete on quality. It's not right. Especially when they were asking you to propose a load of speakers. It's like, well, have you read their proposal? Or haven't got it yet? Well, read their proposal. If it's great, go with them. You went to them first, right? If it's no good and you're not happy with the level of their work, then come to me. And actually, by being that difficult, I often used to get the client coming to me afterwards for the next time, because I thought, well, if she's that difficult, she must be very good turning stuff away. But I didn't want to compete with my competitors on that basis. It was just a waste of everybody's time, because only one of us was going to get it. And I didn't like the odds, really. They had a head start.
But speed is so important. I have to drill it into some members of my team, in that we need to get back to people as quickly as possible. We have all different touch points. We have people can go on the chat on our website. They can inquire. Some of the bureaus, they obviously they have my WhatsApp. So I'm literally we have little groups with a couple of different bureaus. They can just ask me straight away. I know there's one bureau in the Middle East, MENA speakers, Sana Azam's company, where they have it. Someone has to be responded to within 30 minutes. Actually, maybe it's even 20 minutes. Like, it's really quick, and they have people in different time zones in order to kind of facilitate that, because they want speed, quick, and that's quite a Dubai thing as well. Whereas sometimes I'm a little bit amazed where you sometimes hear of some speakers who will take days to respond to an inquiry that comes in from a bureau or a client, and I think, how can they still be working? Like, someone's going to moved on at some point.
Yeah, it only works when you're so much in demand, when they only want that particular individual. So the name is that big, and then they will wait. And because I've had that too, when somebody's waiting for a response from somebody who's a big name, a Richard Branson, for example, or Simon Sinek, or whatever, they will wait because that's who they want. They don't want anybody else. So on those occasions it works. But yeah, you're right. It is very much about speed and responsiveness. You cannot be slow. So you've got to have something in your setup in your system where you are able to go back to people. I used to favour the telephone rather than anything else. Just pick up the phone,
I think it's great if you're in the time zone. We've spoken about Phil M. Jones before. That was one of the things that I know he does, is as soon as he gets the website inquiry in for the website, even though he has an assistant, he will then often just jump on. If they've got the telephone number, he will just call them. Hey, it's Phil here. I'm at the airport. I just saw the inquiry came in. I thought it's probably just easy if I just give you a call. Tell me about your event that's coming up. And I've done that before as well. And people love it because it's like, wow, this is like, and they get a bit of a surprise as well sometimes because like, wow, this person's really like super responsive. So yeah, speed. Was it that they said speed kills deals? I think that was the term, wasn't it? You know, things take a little bit too long and it slows down.
Absolutely. I think, in fact, there are some statistics, we'll have to look them up and put them in the notes, about the fact that the proportion of closed deals and sales, because of response, somebody being more responsive than somebody else, you're going to win every time. So you might see a speaker on stage and think, well, you know, why did they book them? You know, I'm way better. They probably responded faster than you did.
Yeah. So this next one I'm going to ask you, this is going to be controversial, and I was a little bit hesitant about speaking about it publicly on the show like this, but I thought let's talk about it because it's a conversation I often have with other speakers. Is that, especially when I was starting in my speaking career, what I would do is if inquiries would come in from a client, I would often forward those inquiries to a bureau that I hadn't yet developed a relationship with. And I would say to the bureau, hey, I've had this inquiry, I am available in the state, can you follow up with it and hopefully close a deal and just take your commission and everything. So it's basically a free lead that I'm giving to that client. And then what I would do is I would watch. I would sit back and I would watch, and I would watch for two things. I would watch how quickly they close the deal. So, you know, sometimes they're not going to close the deal because that's the nature of the thing. But I would kind of watch how they dealt with the client. And then I would also watch, for some of them, how much business they might start sending back the other way. So they actually start sending business my way. And the third thing I would watch for very closely is would they do a bait and switch? Where they would recommend an exclusive speaker that's on their roster, that maybe was a higher fee than me, for example. So let's talk about this, because this is something that's often not talked about. Maybe it's in the back rooms, but exclusive and non-exclusive speakers with bureaus. Talk about the difference between those things, how the fee, often the royalty structures work there, why would someone be an exclusive as opposed to non-exclusive, and if you've ever seen this kind of bait and switch things before, where someone inquires about a particular speaker name, but then the bureau agent says, actually, I don't think you want this person, you want this other person instead. Or this other person not available, which is the one I've heard sometimes say, or James isn't available in this state, even though I was available. And it kind of left me with a little bit of bad taste in my mouth. I just didn't send any business to that bureau. But I've spoken to lots of speakers who have experienced exactly the same thing as this.
Interesting. So I'm trying to rack my brain, because I think when we started working together, I think you sent me an inquiry. So you were testing, huh? You were watching. Interesting.
Watch.
Interesting.
You passed the test, Maria. You passed the test.
It wasn't a difficult test, James. Everybody should pass that test. I think it's the basics. There's some, so, you know, we talked about ego and we talked about bad behavior in a previous episode. We should also talk about some of the things that bureaus do that are terrible. So when I had my bureau, I deliberately did not want to have any exclusive speakers for that particular reason. I didn't want anybody breathing down my neck saying, I haven't had enough gigs this month, blah, 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 that, you know, you've got to go out and do these things, because it was enough pressure and stress. And part of the reason was, when I started out in CSA Celebrity Speakers, we did have exclusive speakers. And I recall a scenario where I was called out because there was a particular exclusive who I had never booked, and you know, you have to book him. I said, I haven't got the inquiries. They're not right. It's not a good fit. And so I was having to justify and defend, when my view was, I need to be selling the right speaker. You know, matching the correct speaker to the correct event. So I don't particularly like the idea of exclusives. When I had my bureau, there are benefits to being exclusive and there are disadvantages to being exclusive. And the reason that many speakers will go exclusive is that they want to have somebody who runs the office for them, who runs their speaking for them. They don't want to employ someone and train someone. They'd rather have somebody who already knows the business, and therefore it makes sense, because they're only paying them a percentage when a booking comes in, when an inquiry comes in. So actually that works really, really well. And then, of course, they have the benefit that bureau as well, because they're getting the benefit of their incoming inquiries, they can then also be putting them forward and selling them themselves, so they get more work. The problem is the balance is, how much is the exclusive person delivering to the bureau and how much is the bureau delivering to the exclusive. I think that in order to go exclusive, you should have a certain amount of business coming directly from that bureau before you go exclusive. I don't think a bureau should ever ask you to go exclusive if they've never booked you. And many bureaus will, because they want you to give them the incoming inquiries. I'm going to make a lot of enemies here if I'm not careful. Please do not write in. So my view is, deliver first before I sign up exclusive. Let's prove it, or guarantee me a level of business. Tell me what you're going to be able to deliver for me before I go exclusive. So, and of course, if you are exclusive, you are the one that's going to get promoted more. You're one who's going to get marketed more. You're going to get more visibility. So all of those things are advantages. But I think it has to be on an individual basis that you decide it and what the benefit is to you from doing that with a bureau. Have I answered the question, or have I sort of rambled?
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, and how does it work? Let's say if someone has a relationship with the bureau, they've always been working with this bureau, and they want a speaker, but that speaker is exclusive with another bureau. How does that work? What does that conversation look like? Do they have to switch bureaus and go with this other bureau because they have exclusive?
No, they don't. They can work with the bureau that they have the relationship with, but what will happen is that when that bureau then books the exclusive, and I used to do that a lot. There's a lot of the American speakers are exclusive with American bureaus. A lot of the big names are exclusive with other bureaus, and what you do is you split commissions. So if I was going to a bureau booking a $100,000 speaker, and the commission on that is say was $15,000, we'd split it.
Is it split 50-50? Is that how it works?
50-50.
Or does it go more?
No, it's split 50-50. Sometimes that end bureau that has the exclusive relationship will say, because of security reasons or because of relationship reasons, we will, once the contract is done, we will handle everything from there. And then so you have to be transparent with the end client to say this is the situation. But no, you'd be splitting commission. So you can still work with the bureau, your favoured bureau. Neither bureau likes splitting commissions because they're getting half of what they normally get. The bureau that's having to go to the other bureau that has the exclusive doesn't like doing it, especially if they have to hand their client over because they're losing that relationship. The other bureau that is getting the business, again, doesn't want the 50. So it's uncomfortable, but it works.
Okay. Well, I think we should be talking about next, because we did speakers behaving badly. We should do bureaus behaving badly. So you're going to tell me, you're going to spill some secrets. But before that, let's have a quick word from our sponsors.
If you're a speaker who wants to get more bookings, charge higher fees, and run a thriving speaking business, then you need to know Maria Franzoni. Maria has spent over 2 decades inside the world's top speaker bureaus, negotiating thousands of engagements for some of the biggest names on stage. Today, she works one-to-one with speakers, helping them build the business behind their speaking. If you'd like to be more bookable and more profitable, visit mariafranzoni.me to find out how she can help you.
Okay, Maria. Bureaus behaving badly. Spill all.
Oh my God.
What are some of the worst behaviours you've seen from bureaus?
You mentioned it, actually, the switch. I've actually had a situation where a speaker rang me and said, you won't believe this. I rang up, and it was with a competitor, and he said, I rang up and inquired about my own availability for a gig and to find out about myself. And they told me I wasn't available. So it's exactly the same thing has happened to you, that somebody, and they were trying to sell somebody else, and because he'd had a suspicion. So there are some bureaus that behave badly. More often than not, it's actually what I found. It's not necessarily the bureau itself. It's the individual agents who, for some reason, they might be struggling to close deals. They might have promised something and they have their own agenda. And unfortunately, if it's not caught by the bureau, it makes the whole bureau have a bad reputation. The things what I didn't like and did not allow in my bureau, which I had seen in other bureaus, were margins that were too high, commissions that were too high, where it wasn't the 15, 20 or 25%, but it was significantly more, either added on top or taken from the speaker. And that, for me, left a bad taste in my mouth. So I didn't allow that at all. And in fact, if anything, we were probably, our commissions was probably a little bit lower than the average. But that meant I could sleep at night. Because I think it's not fair. And certainly if a speaker was handing an inquiry to us, we would actually reduce our commission level on anything that a speaker handed us, which I think is the right behaviour of a bureau. They shouldn't be charging the same commission if the speaker is giving you an inquiry. I don't know if you're doing that. I'm going to get into big trouble.
Yeah, that's what we do. Is we have a couple of bureaus in parts of the world that we pretty much give all of our business that comes in for a particular area. And we have negotiated in advance a certain percentage. And actually for some of them, what we've also done is, because a lot of time I'm not available or I'm not in the right fee level or I'm not the right speaker, if they go on to close another speaker with that particular client, then we also receive a commission on that, separately. So
Absolutely.
that is just a way of like just building that kind of relationship, because we're spending money on marketing, PPC, SEO, our team, all that stuff. So we just can't just give over it completely free. It has to be done in that way. And you mentioned this, the switch thing. There was a speaker I spoke to a couple of weeks ago who he had his assistant contact all the bureaus that he was listed on their website, inquiring about booking the speaker for a particular date when the speaker was available. And then he watched to see how many of those actually came in as inquiries from the bureaus. And there was, I can't remember what the number was. You said there was quite a few that just didn't even bother sending them inquiries, or they suggested someone else, or they said this person's not available for this date. So then he actually called up each of these bureaus and they said, take me off your roster. He didn't say why. I just said, just take me off your roster, because he felt, and that's a shame, because maybe it was just one, as you said, it was one particular agent that had done this, not necessarily the bureau. But he just felt that was wrong. And then the other one you mentioned was the fees. I did hear one speaker say to me about a year ago, he discovered that the commission that the bureau had actually taken was 50% on his fee, and it was an undisclosed amount. And actually, this speaker, it wouldn't have been my response, but this was this speaker's response. He said, actually, he was okay with it. This is one of the highest fees a speaker had ever made at this point. And he said, I'm fine about this agent taking 50%. And I was like, no, you didn't know about it. You didn't know, that was going on as well. There was a standard that bureau would take of 25%. And that person decided to take 50%. And for me, that would have just left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, I think.
For me, the problem with that is, if it's an added-on commission, is that you're basically selling a £5,000 speaker for £10,000. The client has a £10,000 expectation. We were talking about setting fees, so you're under delivering. And if that speaker has actually delivered 10,000, that's what he should be getting paid anyway, right? Less the commission and not 5,000. So yeah, I don't like that at all. And the thing is, I believe that whatever you do, you always get found out. So you've got to, behave as if somebody is watching all the time, and then you're fine, right? Just don't do it. And then you will sleep at night. I keep going on about sleeping at night, but it's because I'm a bad sleeper. You never want to have these things niggling at you. You want to do things properly and do things right and be a professional and be remembered for that.
The good news is, for any speakers, they've just been listening to this, who are just coming into the business and hearing all these horror stories and these things, it's kind of not, they're the exception, not the rule. The stories. The vast majority of agents who deal with bureaus are honourable. They just do as expected. All the things are great. So kind of final kind of questions for you, Maria. I would like to get your take on this. Let's imagine you are on a roster with a bureau or a couple of bureaus. How do you build a relationship with them? So going beyond just that you're listed on the website, that's stage one, but actually you really build a relationship. You build a sense of trust with that person. You help them to understand what it is you speak on, the kind of clients that you'd be good for. How do you do that from a practical level? Because no one wants to be bombarded with emails, I'm guessing.
No, nobody does. And it's quite simple, really, because most bureau agents are on commission. So the bureau itself is on commission, and usually the agent is on commission. If you can help that agent make more money, they are going to love you. So, if your expertise is in productivity and you can give a session to the agents on how to be more productive and get more work done, they're going to love you. Right. If your topic is AI and you can give them some AI tools to help them be more fantastic. Or, as you said, if you can hand them an inquiry. And if you have any doubt, if you're handing an inquiry to somebody, an agent that you don't know very well, I would more or less close it before I hand it to them and say, look, I've closed the deal, negotiated the fee. All you need to do is the contract. So that way, if it's taking it that a bit further. But that gift of that client, and other things like you were saying that, when you can't do a gig because the fee's wrong or the topic's wrong, gifting that inquiry, if you don't want to gift one that's one of yours that you've closed, you can gift that inquiry to a bureau that you're not currently working with. You've basically given them a client. So any way that you're helping them make money, helping them develop, helping them to learn, helping them to do more, they're going to love you.
Yeah, I would say this is another thing for speakers, and this isn't really self-serving, but it's more. It's just kind of. I think it's a good thing to do. So I had 2 inquiries in today, both happened to be in the Middle East. One was in UAE, one was in Saudi. And the Saudi one, I don't think I can necessarily do the date. They don't have so much flexibility, and I'm already booked for something else. So one option is you go and you ask and you suggest another individual speaker. And you go and introduce that client to a bureau. And I generally, as a rule, unless it's someone I really know, like this, in my area, it's a topic that creativity, and I know this person really wants creativity, I'm going to recommend someone like a Frederick Harron, because he's like the best. He's just brilliant as a speaker. But most of the time, I'm recommending a bureau, because they have a much better understanding than I do, because I only ever see myself speak. I really get a chance to see so many other speakers, and they can talk to that client and they can say, well, actually, really what you're looking for, it sounds like, is this thing here. So there's this other speaker over here who's brilliant, who's just up and coming, if you really want to. So that's, I would also say, for all those ones that you can't do, or you're not right for, or you're not in the right fee level, give that business to a bureau.
Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely. We've given 2 excellent tips there.
Yeah, great. So any other final tips? Someone's just now, what is the first thing that they should be doing? They're not with a bureau, any bureaus just now. They want to be with a bureau. Maybe their fee level is up at that kind of 5-10K range, let's say. So they're kind of getting the point where they can start working with bureaus. What is their first point? What's the first thing that they should do?
Do you know what I would do? I would go to my website, to my free resources section, download my free resources and look at the Speaker Bureau checklist and just go through and make sure you tick all those boxes before you do anything. That's what I would do.
Great. We're going to put that link here as well. So thank you everyone for listening, watching. Maria, as always love speaking to you. Always learn loads on our conversations as well. My name is James Taylor.
And I've been Maria Franzoni.
And you're listening to the SpeakersU Podcast. Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Imagine stepping onto stages around the world, sharing your message, inspiring thousands, and getting paid what you deserve. If you're a coach, author, thought leader, or consultant ready to build a global speaking career, listen up. Introducing the International Speakers Summit with James Taylor, where 150-plus pro speakers, trainers, and business coaches reveal the exact strategies behind launching, growing, and monetizing an international speaking business. You'll learn storytelling that moves, mindset shifts that scale, how to package and price your talks, and even get video, audio downloads, workbooks, and bonus content. All of this for just $97 with the VIP Pass. Over 100 hours of premium, actionable content. Ignite your stage presence. Amplify your voice. Dominate the speaker marketplace. Go to SpeakersU.com and unlock your International Speakers Summit Pass today, because the world is waiting to hear you.